Lisa walked through the doors of Riverside Community College on a Tuesday morning, clutching a worn leather bag that had seen better days. At 34, she looked like any other working adult trying to squeeze some personal time into her busy schedule. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain sweater that had probably come from a department store clearance rack. The hallways buzzed with the usual college energy. Young students rushed past her with backpacks, covered in pins and stickers, while a few other adults like herself moved more slowly, checking room numbers on folded pieces of paper. Lisa found herself doing the same thing, even though she had memorized the route to room 142 the night before. She had signed up for intermediate piano 3 weeks ago, after months of staring at the course catalog online. Every time she opened her laptop, she would scroll through the music classes, her finger hovering over the registration button. Part of her wanted to take the beginner class, but she knew that would be too obvious. Intermediate felt safer somehow, a place where she could blend in without standing out. The piano room was smaller than she expected. About 15 students were already seated in plastic chairs arranged in a semicircle around an old upright piano. Lisa chose a seat near the back, close to the window where she could watch the oak trees swaying in the morning breeze if things got uncomfortable. Professor Martinez walked in exactly at 9 o'clock, carrying a stack of sheet music and a coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Teacher." He was probably in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of enthusiastic energy that made Lisa both nervous and oddly comforted. "Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to our new students," he said, his eyes briefly scanning the room. "I hope you're all ready to push yourselves this semester. Music isn't just about playing the right notes, it's about telling a story." Lisa shifted in her seat. She had heard variations of this speech hundreds of times before, but coming from Professor Martinez, it felt different, more genuine, less like a performance. "Let's start with introductions," he continued. "Tell us your name, why you're here, and what your musical background looks like." One by one, the students shared their stories. There was Jennifer, a nursing student who wanted to learn piano to help with her church choir. Michael, a retired accountant who had always regretted not learning an instrument. Amanda, a 20-year-old who had played guitar in high school and wanted to try something new. When it was Lisa's turn, she felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that always came when people looked at her expectantly. "I'm Lisa," she said, keeping her voice steady and quiet. "I work in accounting at a small firm downtown. I took some piano lessons as a kid but never really stuck with it. Just thought it might be nice to try again." Professor Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful. It's never too late to reconnect with music. What kind of music do you enjoy?" "Oh, just regular stuff, I guess. Popular songs, maybe some classical pieces that aren't too complicated." Lisa felt bad about the lie, but it was necessary. The truth was too complicated, too heavy for a simple introduction in a community college classroom. After introductions, Professor Martinez had them each play something simple on the piano. Just a few scales, maybe a basic song they knew. Lisa watched as her classmates took turns, some confident, others clearly nervous. Jennifer's hands shook slightly as she played "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Michael apologized 3 times before he even touched the keys. When her turn came, Lisa approached the piano with careful steps. She could feel the familiar weight of the keys under her fingers, the slight resistance that every piano had. This one was old and a bit out of tune, but it would do. She played a simple arrangement of "Amazing Grace," deliberately keeping her touch light and occasionally stumbling over transitions that she could have played perfectly in her sleep. She made sure to pause once as if trying to remember the next part, and she played the ending just a little too slowly, like someone who wasn't quite comfortable with the rhythm yet. "Very nice, Lisa," Professor Martinez said as she returned to her seat. "I can tell you have some natural ability. We'll work on building your confidence this semester." Natural ability, if only he knew. Over the next few weeks, Lisa settled into the routine of the class. She arrived 5 minutes early and left promptly when class ended. She sat in the same chair by the window and spoke only when directly asked a question. During Practice time. She would sit at one of the smaller keyboards in the back corner, playing simple exercises while listening to her classmates work through their assignments. The other students began to accept her as just another quiet adult learner. Jennifer would sometimes smile at her when she walked in. Michael once asked if she wanted to grab coffee after class, but she politely declined, saying she had to get back to work. Professor Martinez seemed to view her as a steady, reliable student. Not the most talented in the class, but not the most struggling either. He would occasionally stop by her keyboard during practice time to offer gentle corrections or encouragement. Try to keep your wrists a little higher, he might say. Or don't be afraid to put more feeling into it. The music wants to be heard. Lisa would nod and thank him, making the adjustments he suggested while being careful not to reveal how much she already knew about proper technique. It was like walking a tightrope, showing just enough improvement to seem like a normal student while hiding the years of training that had been drilled into her muscle memory. The hardest part wasn't the technical deception. It was sitting in that room, surrounded by people who were discovering the joy of music for the first time, and remembering why she had fallen in love with it herself. She watched Jennifer's face light up when she finally managed to play a piece without mistakes. She saw the pride in Michael's eyes when he successfully played a simple Bach invention. These people were playing for pure joy, without the weight of expectations or the pressure to be perfect. They made mistakes and laughed about them. They celebrated small victories and supported each other through difficult passages. It was everything that Lisa had lost somewhere along the way. Sometimes, late at night in her small apartment, Lisa would sit at her electric keyboard with headphones on and play the pieces she really wanted to play. Her fingers would move across the keys with the precision and artistry that had once defined her entire identity. But even then, she kept the volume low, as if someone might hear and discover her secret. She had built a quiet life for herself. She had a steady job, a small circle of friends who knew nothing about her musical background, and enough anonymity to feel safe. The community college class was supposed to be a small, controlled way to reconnect with music without risking everything she had worked to build. But as she sat in that back row week after week, watching her classmates grow and improve, Lisa began to wonder if hiding was really protecting her, or if it was just another kind of prison. She pushed the thought away each time it surfaced, reminding herself that she had tried the other path before, and it had nearly destroyed her. For now, she would continue to be just Lisa, the quiet accountant who was learning to play piano again. It was safer that way, even if it wasn't entirely honest. Some secrets, she told herself, were worth keeping. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa started her piano classes, and she had finally found her rhythm. She knew exactly how to play well enough to seem competent, but not so well that anyone would ask questions. She had even started to enjoy the Tuesday and Thursday morning routine, the familiar faces of her classmates and the gentle encouragement from Professor Martinez. That comfort zone shattered on a Thursday morning when Professor Martinez walked into class carrying a stack of different sheet music than usual. Instead of his regular cheerful greeting, he had a more serious expression on his face. "All right, everyone, settle down," he said, setting the papers on his desk. "We're halfway through the semester now, and it's time to talk about your midterm evaluations." Lisa felt her stomach drop slightly. She had known this was coming, of course. The syllabus had mentioned a performance component, but she had been hoping it would be something simple and forgettable. "Each of you will need to perform a solo piece for the class," Professor Martinez continued. "This isn't just about playing the notes correctly. I want to see how you've grown as musicians, how you can express yourself through your instrument." Jennifer raised her hand nervously. "How long does the piece need to be?" "Nothing too long. 3 to 4 minutes should be perfect. I'll be assigning each of you a piece that I think will challenge you appropriately." He picked up the stack of sheet music and started walking around the room. "Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress." Lisa watched as he handed out assignments to her classmates. Jennifer got a simple arrangement of Für Elise. Michael received a basic Bach minuet. Amanda was given what looked like a popular song arrangement. Each piece seemed perfectly matched to the student's current skill level. When Professor Martinez reached Lisa's chair, he paused for a moment, studying her with a thoughtful expression. Instead of handing her a single sheet of music like the others, he pulled out several pages stapled together. "Lisa, I've been watching your progress these past few weeks," he said, his voice carrying a tone that made her increasingly uncomfortable. "I think you've been holding back a little. You have more potential than you're showing." Lisa's heart started beating faster. "Oh, I don't know about that. I'm just trying to keep up with everyone else." Professor Martinez smiled and placed the stack of papers on her desk. "That's exactly what I mean. Too much modesty. I'm giving you Chopin's Etude in C-sharp minor, Opus 10, number 4. The blood drained from Lisa's face as she looked down at the familiar sheet music. She knew this piece intimately. She had performed it at Lincoln Center when she was 15 years old. It was one of the most technically demanding etudes in the piano repertoire, known for its lightning-fast arpeggios and the stamina required to maintain the intense pace throughout. "Professor Martinez," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I think there might be a mistake. This looks really complicated. Maybe something simpler would be better?" "Nonsense," he said, clearly pleased with himself. "I've seen how you play during our practice sessions. You have good finger control and musical instincts. This piece will push you to discover what you're really capable of." Lisa looked around the room and noticed that several of her classmates were staring at her with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity. Jennifer leaned over and whispered, "Wow, that looks intense. He must really believe in you." "I really don't think I'm ready for something this advanced." Lisa tried again, holding up the sheet music. "Look at all these notes. I'm still working on getting basic pieces clean." Professor Martinez waved off her concerns. "Lisa, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I know when a student is ready for a challenge. Trust me on this. Sometimes we need to be pushed out of our comfort zone to grow. But what if I can't play it? What if I mess up in front of everyone?" Lisa could hear the genuine panic creeping into her voice, though not for the reasons Professor Martinez assumed. "Then you mess up," he said with an encouraging smile. "That's how we learn. The worst thing that happens is you don't play it perfectly and we move on. But I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself." As class continued with Professor Martinez explaining the timeline for the performances, Lisa stared down at the sheet music in front of her. Every note, every marking, every phrase was burned into her memory from years of practice and performance. She could play this piece flawlessly right now, today, without even warming up. But that was exactly the problem. After class, Lisa sat in her car in the parking lot for 15 minutes, staring at the Chopin Etude. She thought about going back into the building and finding Professor Martinez, maybe claiming a family emergency or sudden illness that would require her to drop the class. But she'd already missed too much of her life running away from difficult situations. That evening, Lisa sat at her small electric keyboard in her apartment, the sheet music propped up in front of her even though she didn't need it. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play the opening measures at about half the proper tempo, deliberately making her technique sloppy and uncertain. This is what she would have to do for the next 3 weeks. Pretend to learn a piece she had mastered 20 years ago. Pretend to struggle with passages that felt as natural as breathing. Pretend to be surprised by her own progress as she gradually improved. The next Tuesday, Professor Martinez checked in with each student about their midterm pieces. When he got to Lisa, she had prepared her response carefully. "I've been working on it," she said, trying to sound overwhelmed but determined. "It's definitely challenging. Some of these fast sections are really tricky." "That's exactly what I want to hear," he said enthusiastically. "Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just focus on musicality and do your best with the technical parts." Over the following weeks, Lisa found herself in an impossible situation during every class. When Professor Martinez asked students to play excerpts from their pieces, she had to carefully calibrate her performance. Too sloppy and it would be obviously fake. Too polished, and she would give herself away. She developed a strategy of playing most sections reasonably well, but deliberately stumbling over specific passages each time, as if they were particular trouble spots she was working to overcome. She would pause occasionally as if trying to remember what came next, then continue with slightly less confidence. Her classmates began to offer encouragement and support. Jennifer would give her thumbs up after she played. Michael started staying after class to offer moral support, sharing stories about pieces he had struggled with. "You're doing great," Amanda told her one day. "That piece sounds so much better than when you started. You must be practicing a lot." Lisa smiled and nodded, feeling guilty about the deception but trapped by the situation she had created. "Just trying to keep up," she said. The hardest part wasn't the technical deception. It was watching Professor Martinez's pride in what he thought was her rapid improvement. He would beam when she played slightly better than the previous week. He started staying after class to give her extra tips and encouragement. "See? I told you that you had it in you," he would say. "You're proving that dedication and hard work can overcome any challenge." Each compliment felt like a weight on Lisa's chest. Professor Martinez was a good teacher and a kind man who genuinely wanted to help his students succeed. He had no way of knowing that his inspiring success story was built on a lie. With only 1 week left before the performance, Lisa realized she had painted herself into a corner. She would have to choose between humiliating herself with a deliberately poor performance of a piece she could play beautifully, or revealing the truth and facing all the complications that would follow. Neither option felt like something she could live with. The week before the performance felt like the longest 7 days of Lisa's life. Every morning she woke up with a knot in her stomach, and every night she went to bed with the same heavy feeling pressing down on her chest. She had created a mess that seemed impossible to clean up. At work, her coworkers started noticing that something was off. During lunch breaks, instead of joining their usual conversations about weekend plans or office gossip, Lisa would sit quietly at her desk, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. "You okay, Lisa?" asked Janet from the cubicle next to hers. "You seem stressed about something." Lisa forced a smile. "Just tired. I've been practicing piano a lot lately for a class performance." "Oh, that sounds fun. What are you playing?" "Chopin," Lisa said quietly, then immediately regretted mentioning it. Janet didn't know much about classical music, but even she raised her eyebrows. "Wow, that sounds fancy. You must be getting pretty good." If only it were that simple, Lisa thought. Piano classes themselves became torture sessions. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Lisa had to sit through practice time, carefully playing her assigned piece just well enough to show improvement, but not so well that anyone would suspect the truth. She had become an expert at fake struggling. During one class, Professor Martinez pulled up a chair next to her keyboard while she was practicing. "Lisa, I wanted to talk to you about your performance," he said, his voice full of genuine concern. Lisa's heart nearly stopped. Had he figured it out? Had she played too well during the last practice session? "I can see you're nervous about this piece," he continued, "and I understand why. It's challenging even for advanced students, but I want you to know that I chose it specifically because I believe you can handle it. Professor Martinez, I really appreciate your confidence in me, but..." He held up his hand gently. "Let me finish. I've been teaching for a long time, and I've learned to recognize when a student has that special something. You have excellent finger control, natural rhythm, and most importantly, you have musical instincts that can't be taught." Lisa felt sick. Every compliment was like a knife twisting in her stomach. What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? In front of everyone? "Then you keep going," he said with a warm smile. "Music isn't about perfection, Lisa. It's about expression. Even if you stumble over some of the technical passages, if you play with feeling and sincerity, that's what matters." After he walked away, Lisa put her head in her hands. Professor Martinez was being so kind, so encouraging, and she was lying to his face every single day. She thought about all the real students he could be helping instead of wasting time on someone who was pretending to need his guidance. The other students in the class had noticed her apparent struggles too, and their sympathy made everything worse. Jennifer started sitting next to her during theory discussions, offering quiet words of encouragement. Michael brought her coffee one morning, saying he remembered how nervous he had been before his first big performance. "The piece you're working on sounds beautiful when you play it. Amanda told her after class one day. I mean, it's obviously super hard, but you're really getting it. You should be proud of how much you've improved. Lisa wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them all the truth. She wanted to explain that she wasn't improving at all, that she was actually holding herself back every single day, that the beautiful playing they heard was her at maybe 30% of her actual ability, but she couldn't. The words stuck in her throat every time she tried to form them. At home, the situation became even more complicated. Lisa would sit at her electric keyboard with her headphones on, playing the Chopin etude the way it was meant to be played. Her fingers would fly across the keys with the precision and artistry that had once defined her entire identity. The music would pour out of her with all the emotion and technical mastery she had spent years developing. And then she would remember that in a few days, she would have to sit in front of her classmates and deliberately play it worse. She started having dreams about the performance. In some dreams, she would sit down at the piano and find that she had actually forgotten how to play the piece properly. Her fingers would stumble over passages she had known perfectly for decades. In other dreams, she would play beautifully, only to look up and see her old life rushing back toward her, complete with concert schedules, press interviews, and the crushing pressure that had driven her away from music in the first place. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. 3 days before the performance, Professor Martinez made an announcement that made Lisa's blood run cold. I'm excited to tell you that Dean Richardson will be joining us for the performances. On Thursday, he said to the class. She likes to attend student recitals when her schedule allows, and I mentioned that we have some particularly promising students this semester. Lisa felt the room start to spin slightly. Dean Richardson had been a professional pianist before becoming an administrator. She would recognize advanced playing immediately. After class, Lisa approached Professor Martinez with what she hoped was her last desperate attempt to get out of the situation. Professor, I really don't think I'm ready to perform in front of the dean, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Maybe I could just play for the class another time when I've had more practice. Professor Martinez looked surprised. Lisa, you're more ready than you think you are. I heard you playing yesterday, and it sounded wonderful. You've made incredible progress. But what if I freeze up? What if I embarrass myself? You won't embarrass yourself, he said firmly. And even if you did make some mistakes, so what? Dean Richardson understands that these are student performances. She's not expecting Carnegie Hall. Lisa almost laughed at the irony. She had actually performed at Carnegie Hall when she was 17. I'm not good with audiences. She tried one more time. Professor Martinez studied her face carefully. Lisa, can I ask you something? Have you performed in public before? You seem to have a very specific kind of performance anxiety. Lisa's mouth went dry. She had to be very careful here. Just school recitals when I was younger. Nothing big. Well, that explains it, he said, looking relieved. Performance anxiety is completely normal, especially if you had some bad experiences as a child. But the only way to get over it is to keep performing. Trust me, once you start playing on Thursday, all those nerves will disappear. That night, Lisa sat in her apartment staring at the sheet music she didn't need, trying to figure out what to do. She could fake being sick on Thursday, but Professor Martinez would probably just reschedule her performance. She could play badly, on purpose. But the thought of deliberately butchering a piece of music she loved made her feel physically ill. Or she could tell the truth. But the truth was complicated. The truth involved explaining why a former professional pianist was hiding in a community college music class. The truth meant talking about the anxiety attacks, the pressure, the way the music industry had slowly drained all the joy out of something she had once loved more than anything else in the world. The truth meant risking everything she had built in her quiet, anonymous life. Lisa picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Professor Martinez's number. She started typing a text message 3 different times, but each time she deleted it before hitting send. 2 days left. 48 hours to decide whether to keep living the lie or face whatever came next. She set the phone down and put her hands on the keyboard. Without thinking about it, she started playing the Chopin etude, but this time she didn't hold back. She played it with all the skill and passion she possessed, letting the music fill her small apartment. For 4 minutes, she wasn't Lisa the accountant or Lisa the student pretending to struggle. She was just herself, playing music the way she was meant to. When the last note faded, she sat in silence, knowing that whatever happened on Thursday, her secret life was about to end. Thursday morning arrived with gray clouds and a light drizzle that matched Lisa's mood perfectly. She had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning as she rehearsed different scenarios in her mind. None of them ended well. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror trying to decide what to wear. Did she dress like the quiet accountant she pretended to be? Or did she somehow prepare for the possibility that today would change everything? In the end, she chose the same simple black sweater and dark pants she had worn to her very first class. If this was going to be the day her secret came out, at least she would look like herself. The drive to campus felt different. Every red light seemed to last forever, and every green light passed too quickly. Lisa found herself hoping for traffic jams, construction delays, anything that might postpone the inevitable. But the roads were clear, and she arrived at Riverside Community College with 20 minutes to spare. She sat in her car, watching other students walk across the parking lot with their backpacks and coffee cups, looking like they didn't have a care in the world. Lisa envied them. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt that carefree about anything. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister in Portland. "Good luck with your piano thing today. Can't wait to hear how it goes." Lisa stared at the message for a long moment. Even her own family didn't know the truth about her musical background. She had told them she was taking a fun little piano class to relax after work. The lies had spread so far that she couldn't even remember who knew what anymore. She typed back, "Thanks. I'll let you know how it goes." The music building felt different when she walked in. There was a buzz of nervous energy as students prepared for their performances. Lisa could hear scales and arpeggios coming from the practice rooms, mixed with the sounds of people tuning instruments and shuffling sheet music. In the main classroom, chairs had been arranged in rows facing the piano like a mini concert hall. Professor Martinez was setting up a music stand and adjusting the bench height. Dean Richardson was already there, a distinguished woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. She was chatting quietly with Professor Martinez, occasionally glancing at a program he had prepared. Lisa's classmates were scattered around the room in various states of nervousness. Jennifer was in the corner, silently fingering through her piece on an imaginary keyboard. Michael was pacing near the windows, muttering under his breath. Amanda sat in the front row, looking surprisingly calm. "Lisa," Professor Martinez called, out when he saw her. "Come meet Dean Richardson." Lisa's legs felt like they were made of lead as she walked over. Dean Richardson extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm so pleased to meet you," the dean said. "Professor Martinez has told me wonderful things about your progress this semester. I understand you're tackling quite a challenging piece today." "Yes, ma'am," Lisa managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just hope I don't mess it up too badly." Dean Richardson laughed kindly. "Don't worry about perfection, dear. I'm here to celebrate your courage in taking on something difficult. That's what education is all about." Lisa nodded and found a seat, in the back row, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She watched as her classmates took their turns at the piano. Jennifer played her Für Elise arrangement beautifully, with only one small stumble that she recovered from gracefully. The audience applauded warmly, and Professor Martinez beamed with pride. Michael's Bach minuet was careful and precise, if a little slow. Amanda's popular song arrangement had the room swaying along with the rhythm. Each performance was met with genuine enthusiasm from the small audience. Then Professor Martinez called her name. "Lisa, you're up next with Chopin's Etude in C-sharp minor." Lisa heard her name as if it were coming from underwater. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever and no time at all. She sat down on the bench and adjusted the height, even though it was already perfect. She placed her hands on the keys and felt their familiar weight. This piano was the same old, slightly out-of-tune instrument she had been pretending to struggle with for weeks. The room was completely silent. Lisa could feel everyone's eyes on her, but somehow it felt different from the crushing pressure she remembered from her professional days. These people weren't here to judge her harshly or write critical reviews. They were here to support her, to celebrate her effort, to share in whatever happened next. She looked out at the small audience. Professor Martinez sat forward in his chair, his hands clasped together with anticipation. Dean Richardson had a pleasant, expectant expression on her face. Her classmates were all smiling encouragingly, probably thinking about how nervous they would be in her position. Lisa placed her fingers on the opening chord and realized that she had reached the moment of truth. She could play this piece the way she had been playing it in class, with deliberate mistakes and careful restraint. She could maintain her secret for a little while longer. Or she could be honest. Not just honest about her playing, but honest about who she really was. Honest about the fact that she had been lying to these kind people for months. Honest about the fear that had driven her to hide her gifts. Honest about the fact that she had been so afraid of being discovered that she had forgotten why she loved music in the first place. Lisa took a deep breath and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she looked directly at Professor Martinez. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "This piece, I already know how to play it." A confused murmur ran through the audience. Professor Martinez frowned slightly, not understanding what she meant. "I've been lying to all of you," Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm not learning this piece. I learned it 20 years ago. I've been pretending to struggle with it because I was afraid of what would happen if you knew the truth." The room was so quiet that Lisa could hear the clock ticking on the wall. "The truth is that I used to be a professional pianist. I performed, with orchestras, played in concert halls, recorded albums. And I gave it all up because I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. I've been hiding from music, and from myself, for a very long time." She looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Some looked confused, others surprised, but no one looked angry or judgmental. "I came to this class because I missed playing, but I was too scared to be myself. I thought if I pretended to be a beginner, I could just enjoy music without all the complications. But I ended up lying to the kindest teacher and the most supportive classmates I've ever had." Professor Martinez stood up slowly. "Lisa, are you saying that you've been holding back this entire semester?" "Yes," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for deceiving you. You've been so encouraging and patient, and I didn't deserve any of it." "Play it," Dean Richardson said suddenly, her voice cutting through the emotional tension in the room. "Play it the way you really can." Lisa looked at her in surprise. "Please," the dean continued. "If you're going to tell us the truth, then show us the truth." Lisa's hands were shaking as she positioned them over the keys. After months of holding back, of playing carefully and deliberately poorly, she was about to let herself be completely vulnerable in front of these people she had grown to care about. She began to play. From the very first notes, it was clear that something extraordinary was happening. Lisa's fingers moved across the keys with a fluidity and precision that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The rapid arpeggios that had been intimidating black marks on a page suddenly became waterfalls of sound, each note crystal clear and perfectly placed. But it wasn't just the technical mastery that left the audience breathless. It was the emotion pouring out of every phrase. Years of suppressed feelings, months of guilt and fear, and decades of love for music all came flowing out through her fingertips. The piece that her classmates had heard her struggle with for weeks was revealed in its full glory. This wasn't just a difficult etude being played correctly. This was art, pure and simple, created by someone who understood the music so deeply that she could make it speak directly to the hearts of everyone listening. When the final notes faded away, the silence in the room was different from before. It wasn't expectant or nervous. It was the kind of silence that follows something beautiful, when people need a moment to process what they've just experienced. Then Dean Richardson started clapping, and everyone else joined in. But it wasn't the polite applause that had followed the other performances. This was the kind of applause reserved for moments that change everything. The applause seemed to go on forever. But for Lisa, sitting at the piano bench with her hands still resting on the keys, time had stopped completely. She stared down at her fingers, hardly believing what had just happened. After months of hiding, of carefully controlling every note she played, she had finally let herself be completely honest. When the clapping finally died down, the silence that followed felt different from anything Lisa had experienced before. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of people not knowing what to say. It was the kind of silence that comes after something profound has happened, when everyone in the room knows they've witnessed something special. Dean Richardson was the first to speak. She stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving Lisa's face. "How long?" she asked simply. Lisa knew exactly what she meant. "I started playing when I was 4. I performed professionally from age 12 to 22, then I stopped." "Stopped completely?" "I tried to," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could just walk away and forget about it. But you can't really forget something that's been part of you for that long." Professor Martinez was still sitting in his chair, looking like someone had just told him that gravity worked backwards. "Lisa, I don't understand. Why would you hide something like this? Why would you pretend to be a beginner?" Lisa turned on the bench to face the room. Her classmates were all staring at her with expressions ranging from amazement to confusion. Jennifer's mouth was still slightly open from shock. "Because I was scared," Lisa said, the words coming easier now that she had started telling the truth. "The music world can be intense. There's so much pressure to be perfect all the time, to always be better than you were yesterday. I had a few bad experiences, some panic attacks during performances, and I just couldn't handle it anymore." "But you're so talented," Amanda said from the front row. "I mean, what you just played was incredible. How could you want to hide that?" Lisa smiled sadly. "Having talent doesn't mean you're immune to fear. Sometimes it makes things worse because everyone expects so much from you. I got tired of living up to other people's expectations." Michael, who had been unusually quiet, raised his hand slightly. "So when you were sitting next to me in class watching me struggle with that simple Bach piece, you could have played it perfectly?" "Yes," Lisa admitted, feeling the familiar guilt wash over her. "And I felt terrible about it every single day. You were all working so hard, being so encouraging to each other, and I was just lying." "You weren't lying about everything," Professor Martinez said, finally finding his voice. "Your love for music is real. I could see it in your face every time you played, even when you were holding back. That's what made me think you had more potential." Dean Richardson moved closer to the piano. "Lisa, may I ask what you do now? For work, I mean." "I'm an accountant," Lisa said, and several people in the room let out small laughs of surprise. "I know it seems like a strange career change, but I wanted something completely different, something where nobody would expect me to perform or be creative." "And has that made you happy?" the dean asked gently. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question seriously. "It made me feel safe," she said finally. "But I don't think safe and happy are always the same thing." Jennifer suddenly stood up from her seat. "Lisa, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. But when I was playing my piece today, were you judging me? I mean, knowing that you could play circles around all of us?" Lisa felt her heart break a little at the question. "Oh, Jennifer, no. Never. Watching you play, watching all of you, was the best part of these classes. You play with so much joy, so much pure love for the music. I envied that more than you'll ever know." "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "When you played that Bach minuet today, Michael, you made a couple of small mistakes, but you kept going with this huge smile on your face. When you finished, you looked so proud and happy. I haven't felt that way about performing in years. You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." Professor Martinez leaned forward in his chair. "Lisa, can I ask you something? That might seem obvious. Why didn't you just sign up for advanced classes if you wanted to play again?" "Because I didn't trust myself to handle the pressure," Lisa said. "I thought if I could just play simple pieces in a low-pressure environment, I could reconnect with music without all the baggage. But I ended up creating a different kind of pressure by having to lie all the time." Dean Richardson sat down in one of the student chairs. You know, Lisa, you're not the first talented musician I've met who stepped away from performing. The classical music world can be brutal, especially for young performers, but that doesn't mean you have to stay away forever. I don't know if I'm ready to go back to that world, Lisa said honestly. Who says you have to go back to that world? Professor Martinez asked. There are lots of ways to be involved with music that don't involve concert halls and recording contracts. Amanda raised her hand tentatively. Lisa, would you consider maybe helping some of us with our playing? Not like formal teaching or anything, just maybe some tips? Lisa looked around the room at her classmates' faces. Instead of resentment or anger about her deception, she saw curiosity and hope. These people who had been supporting and encouraging her for months were still willing to include her in their musical journey. I would love that, she said, and meant it completely. Over the next hour, what had started as a formal student recital turned into an impromptu conversation about music, fear, expectations, and finding joy in playing. Dean Richardson shared stories about professional musicians who had found new ways to engage with music outside the traditional performance circuit. Professor Martinez talked about the different reasons people come to music and how all of them are valid. Lisa found herself opening up about her past in ways she hadn't done in years. She told them about performing at Lincoln Center when she was 15, about the review that called her technically proficient but emotionally cold, about the panic attack she had on stage in Chicago that convinced her she needed to stop performing. But what you played today wasn't emotionally cold, Jennifer said. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in person. That's because I wasn't performing for critics or trying to impress anyone, Lisa realized as she said it. I was just sharing something I love with people I care about. When the informal gathering finally broke up, Dean Richardson approached Lisa privately. I have a proposition for you, she said. We have a community outreach program where musicians perform for senior centers, hospitals, schools in underserved areas. The audiences are small, supportive, and just grateful to hear live music. No pressure, no reviews, no expectations beyond sharing something beautiful. Would you be interested? Lisa felt something inside her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. It took her a moment to recognize it as excitement. Yes, she said. I think I would like that very much. Professor Martinez joined them. And Lisa, I hope you'll consider staying in the class. Not to pretend to learn pieces you already know, but maybe to help me teach. Having someone with your experience and your understanding of performance anxiety could help other students who might be struggling with similar issues. As Lisa drove home that afternoon, she thought about how different this morning had been from what she expected. She had woken up dreading the day, certain that revealing her secret would lead to uncomfortable questions and unwanted pressure. Instead, she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for, a community of people who loved music for the right reasons. That evening, Lisa sat at her electric keyboard, but this time she didn't put on headphones. She played some of her favorite pieces, letting the sound fill her small apartment. Her neighbors could hear if they wanted to. She wasn't hiding anymore. For the first time in years, she was making music, not because she had to, not because someone expected her to, but simply because it brought her joy. And maybe, she thought as she played a gentle melody that had been running through her head all day, that was the most important reason of all. She had learned that the opposite of hiding wasn't necessarily performing on grand stages. Sometimes, it was just being honest about who you are and finding people who appreciate you for it. Music had brought her back to herself, and more importantly, it had brought her back to other people who understood what it meant to love something deeply, whether you were a beginner or a professional. The quiet accountant and the former piano prodigy weren't two different people after all. They were both just Lisa, someone who had needed time to figure out how to be herself again.